Have you ever felt overwhelmed by emotions and unsure about how to feel or express them? Do you find yourself avoiding certain emotions or suppressing certain emotions because they seem too difficult to deal with? Have you ever felt like your emotions are controlling you rather than you being in control of them? Do you often judge yourself for how you feel, thinking that you shouldn't be feeling a certain way? Do you struggle with identifying what you're truly feeling and what that might be telling you about your needs and desires? Have past experiences or traumas made you hesitant to fully engage with your emotions? Do you often feel like you're stuck in a cycle of emotional stagnation or unprocessed feelings? Many people struggle to fully embrace and understand their emotions. Welcome to The Simple Source, your source for all things self-love, self-healing, personal growth, and spirituality. I'm your host, Linda Valines. I used to be chronically sick and unhappy. I spent years trying anything and everything to heal, but I never got better. It wasn't until my late husband was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer that I finally stopped searching for the answers outside of myself and turned within. I taught myself how to truly love and heal myself, how to finally be authentically healthy and happy, mind, body, and soul. I have over 10 years of personal and professional self-healing and teaching experience. I'm a trauma-informed, certified holistic health and wellness coach, certified Ayurveda counselor, and author. I healed myself of a lifetime of complex traumas and chronic conditions with joy and ease. Now I'm teaching you to do the same. So if you're ready to heal and love yourself more, mind, body, and soul, without all the struggle and stress, and with more joy and productivity, join me to liberate your highest, healthiest, and happiest self and learn how to thrive more simply. Let's get started with today's episode. It can be easy to feel intimidated by emotions when you were not taught or modeled emotional health, which I deem a combination of emotional intelligence, emotional maturity, and emotional stability. A lot of people judge their emotions. A lot of people identify with their emotions. And a lot of people are disconnected from their emotions entirely. But developing a healing and healthy relationship with your emotions is absolutely essential for unlocking productive healing and a more authentic and fulfilled life. In today's episode, we're going to peel back the layers on what emotions truly are and why they're so critical to a full and rich life and why they're so fundamental to an authentic and meaningful healing journey. We're also going to address why so many people struggle with their emotional health. And we're also going to talk about what emotional intelligence is and emotional maturity is and what they really mean and why they're absolutely necessary to develop in order for you to feel safely and productively so that you can heal. And we're going to tackle the common pitfalls of emotional stagnation and how an unhealthy relationship with your emotions can trap you in outdated narratives and inner stress. And most importantly, I'm going to lay out some practical steps to help you develop emotional intelligence and maturity and health. And I'm going to help you trust your body to feel and set healthy emotional boundaries. Like most people, I did not grow up in an emotionally healthy environment. My parents, who are Asian, big surprise if you're watching me, were only comfortable with an extremely limited range of emotions. So I was only allowed to express neutral or happy emotions. Anger was not acceptable. Crying, super not acceptable. I was guilted and I was shamed so often because their parenting tactic was punishment and negative reinforcement. And my emotional needs in childhood were not met. They were, in fact, shamed and criticized. And if I became emotional, which was often because I have emotional authority. If you know human design, you know what I'm talking about. So I am an emotional fucking creature. That's just how I am. And I was emotional as a child. And when I was emotional as a child, I was told that it wouldn't be tolerated. I was told that I wouldn't be spoken to until I became unemotional. And I was blamed for my parents' stresses and made to feel guilty for wanting the essential things that any child wants, which is just to feel loved. So I was not emotionally safe as a child. It was not safe for me to feel or express my emotions, and I was often shamed and guilted and blamed and emotionally manipulated. My childhood was emotionally traumatizing because I was emotionally abused, and it was because my parents lacked emotional health, they lacked emotional intelligence, they lacked emotional maturity. And so I wasn't emotionally abused because they intended to harm me, but simply because of their own emotional traumas. That's how their parents related and treated them. And my parents didn't resolve their emotional traumas. And so they were just projecting that on to me. And my parents are still not emotionally intelligent or mature or healthy. They're still uncomfortable with anger and crying. They're still not emotionally free. And I have forgiven them many times over and over again, because that's the process of forgiving a lifetime of trauma and so many countless adverse childhood experiences and childhood traumas. You have to forgive over and over again at times. And so I've forgiven them, and I've forgiven their wounded inner kids, which is really who was at play, because they were emotionally hurt and emotionally starved. And I also understand, because of all the healing work that I've done, that it's not my responsibility to heal my parents. It's not my responsibility to fix my parents or to convince them to change. That's their responsibility. Their emotions are theirs and my emotions are mine. And as an adult, I have done my part, which is to do my own healing work and to make my own peace with myself and peace with my emotional past, and to heal my wounded inner child and to be there for her emotionally, and to be present and loving toward myself today. That's my part. And so now my relationship with my emotions is deeply gratifying and liberating and joyful. I love all my emotions, and I appreciate all the wisdom and information that all my emotions provide me, because I've learned to trust myself, to feel. I've learned to trust that every emotion has a purpose and that every emotion is valid. So let's talk about emotions. What are emotions? That's a fun way to say it. So emotions are, let's get serious for a second. Everybody, let's get serious about emotions. Okay. Emotions are basically chemicals and responses and energy. So from a neuroscientific perspective, emotions arise from a series of chemical interactions that originate in the limbic and primal part of your brain that then coordinate with neurotransmitters and hormones in response to a stimulus. So your amygdala and your hippocampus, which is where your long-term memories are stored, they communicate to make sense of the emotion according to your previous life experiences, like whether that emotion means that you're in danger or not. And then they organize an appropriate response. So essentially, emotions are responses, and those responses are largely subjective, meaning in relation to your individual experiences and beliefs and reality. So a situation that produces an emotion in me may not produce the same emotion in you. That's very, very important to understand as we discuss emotional maturity later. Emotions are personal, they're subjective, they arise in you because of you. Now, let me make a distinction here for those of you who identify with your emotions, which is different from identifying your emotions, okay? Identifying with your emotions means you believe that feeling an emotion makes you that emotion. That emotion becomes your identity. Like if you feel sad, then you are a sad person. If you feel shame, then you are a bad person. That's identifying with your emotions. Now, identifying your emotions is labeling an emotion for what it is. Like, I am feeling sad. The emotion is sadness. I'm feeling anger. The emotion is anger. Those are two very different things. The former is emotional immaturity, and the latter is emotional intelligence. Emotions are a part of you, but they are not you. Just because you have a brain doesn't mean that you are your brain. You are the sum of all your parts, mind, body, and soul. But who you are is not just limited to just an aspect of your mind or an aspect of your body or just your mind or your body. On a spiritual level, I mean, arguably your soul is the most important aspect of you and is your true identity. But for the sake of this discussion and addressing your 3D experience, your wholeness is holistic, which means your identity is more than just singular parts of you. So another example is like you have thoughts, but you are not your thoughts. Okay? So now on a quantum level, emotions are energy because everything is energy. In Latin, emotion means energy and motion. And that's critical to understand because when you lack a healthy relationship with your emotions, you're stifling your energy because you're avoiding your emotions, you're suppressing your emotions. And because energy is so essential to existence, that means that energy is essential for your well-being and healing. And so when you stifle, suppress your emotions, that means you're stifling energy for your healing and for your well-being. And basically that means that when you deny your emotions, you're blocking their movement. You're blocking that energy from moving, and then you inhibit their natural function, which then means that you're inhibiting your natural well-being and existence. Emotions have to move. They need to move. That's their very design. And so emotions arise so that they can be felt and thus released, i.e. move. So now that you have a basic understanding of emotions, let's define emotional health and discuss why it's so critical for productive and joyful healing. My definition of emotional health is an authentically dominant, positive emotional state that is maintained with appropriate acceptance, processing, regulation, and release of your emotions that's rooted in emotional intelligence, emotional maturity, and unconditional self-love. Now, by positive, let me be clear. By positive, I do not mean that you are happy all the time. If you listen to the last episode about toxic and genuine positivity, you understand the distinction that I am making now. So if you haven't listened to that episode, I invite you to do that at the end of this episode. So again, by positive, I don't mean that you're happy all the time. I mean that you are emotionally regulated so that your emotional equilibrium leans towards peaceful instead of turbulent. And yes, self-love is crucial for emotional health. You have to love your emotions in order to have a healthy relationship with them. Judging your emotions means that you're judging yourself. Criticizing your emotions means that you're criticizing yourself. Rejecting your emotions means that you are rejecting yourself. Now, without emotional health, what happens is you're prone to deny, suppress, repress, become overwhelmed by, or you identify with your emotions, which means that your emotions become trapped and they take on a needlessly stressful role in your mind and body. And to build a healing and healthy relationship with your emotions requires utilizing unconditional self-love, practicing unconditional self-love, developing emotional intelligence and emotional maturity. and having a willingness to feel and learn what your emotions have to teach you. Every single emotion has a purpose, which means every emotion is valid and every emotion is acceptable. All emotions are healthy. It's whether or not you relate to your emotions in a healthy way that makes them unhealthy. So the more that you practice accepting and honoring and feeling and processing and releasing your emotions, the more that you're going to build emotional resilience. And the more that you're going to be able to relate to other people's emotions with genuine empathy and compassion and presence and boundaries. And that's how emotional intelligence and maturity develop, with you having an authentic and loving relationship with yourself and with your emotions. So let's talk about why people lack emotional health. Many people grow up, just like me, without learning how to identify, express, process, and feel their emotions in a healthy and regulated and empowered and authentic manner. And that leads to confusion and emotional neglect because our parents or caregivers, they lacked emotional health. Growing up with parents or caregivers and role models who lacked emotional intelligence and or maturity is so common, and it leads to the adoption of unhealthy emotional habits and beliefs. When we're not able to fully express our emotions as a child, it's very traumatic because it's very stressful to not be able to exist as our whole authentic selves. And many of us were shamed for certain emotions, shamed for crying, shamed for being angry. And all of that is deeply traumatic for a child because a child doesn't have the mental acuity or capacity to understand that parenting style has nothing to do with them and has everything to do with the parent who lacks emotional health. And so the child, what happens, internalizes that shaming or that punishment and then believes that they are bad for feeling. Also, many people grow up without emotional boundaries in their home environments, in their family dynamics, in their school or religion. And children are made to feel responsible for their parents or their caretakers or teachers' emotions. That's also traumatic for a child to feel like you're the cause of your parents' stress or pain or suffering. That's very traumatic because when we're not taught or modeled clear emotional boundaries, what happens is you just inevitably take on other people's emotions. You then learn to neglect your own needs, and then you get used to emotional exhaustion and overwhelm and codependency. So unresolved past traumas are inevitably paired with unresolved emotional wounds because trauma is essentially your response to a stressful event. And when there's stress, there's an emotion like anxiety or fear or overwhelm or resentment or anger. So that's why unresolved traumas and unprocessed emotions, they just go hand in hand. And when you have unresolved traumas and unprocessed emotions, then you have barriers to emotional health and resiliency and stability as an adult. Also, if you lack a safe and supportive environment to express your emotions, then you end up bottling up your feelings, and then that leads to emotional stagnation. And that's a very, very common inner child wound when the inner child has decades of denied and suppressed or repressed feelings because they never felt safe or accepted to have those feelings in the first place. And so you have to remember that emotions, they don't disappear just because you deny or you avoid them. Energy doesn't vanish. It cannot be destroyed. Energy can only be transformed. And so that emotional stuckness becomes eventually physical and mental symptoms. And also cultural and societal norms, they also play a huge part in why so many people lack emotional health. Societal expectations and outdated gender roles, they discourage emotional expression, particularly in men, but also for women. Women get shamed for being emotional. Men get shamed for being emotional. We're all shamed for being emotional. And all of that promotes the idea that emotions are a sign of weakness or a sign of instability. And that's such a harmful and limiting belief and conditioning that needs to be challenged. And so because of all of that, so many people also fear being vulnerable because they fear being judged for expressing their true emotions. And they want to avoid more emotional distress. And then that just leads to more emotional suppression and avoidance. And the cycle goes on and on and on. And then you have like literally a lifetime of unprocessed and unreleased emotions. And what happens instead of feeling, because you're just like full to the brim with so many unprocessed and unfelt emotions, and because of societal norms and so much conditioning, people end up intellectualizing or rationalizing their emotions. And that also largely contributes to anxiety and depression because it creates a disconnect between the mind and the body, where you don't trust your body to feel and you become over-reliant on your mind. So when you have these deep-seated beliefs about emotions being dangerous or bad or overwhelming, and you don't have the tools to be emotionally healthy, what happens is you end up reinforcing all of those original subconscious programming that tells you that emotions are bad. And then you're just further stuck in emotional stagnation, and you continue to be hijacked by those emotions in your day-to-day life. We're going to get into that a little more later, but let's break down the facets of what emotional health is, which are emotional intelligence and emotional maturity and emotional freedom or stability. So what's emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence is your ability to understand, to be objective, and to be aware of your own emotions, in addition to your ability to understand and empathize with other people's emotions. So how well you understand your emotions and how well you understand other people's emotions determines your level of emotional intelligence. So those people with high emotional intelligence, they're both connected to the full range of their emotions, and they can also acknowledge the full range of emotions in another person. And not only that, but they know what those emotions mean. Emotional intelligence requires emotional awareness, which is you being able to recognize or identify your emotions as they arise, you being able to recognize emotional patterns and also what activates certain emotional states in you. Emotional intelligence also requires you to develop emotional vocabulary, meaning your ability to articulate emotional experiences and communicate that with yourself and with other people. Like, I'm feeling this emotion, or you are feeling that emotion. So now, to be clear, being emotionally empathetic or emotionally sensitive or emotional is not the same thing as being emotionally intelligent. I think those are some common misconceptions. Being able to feel someone else's emotions, or crying easily or feeling deeply, that doesn't equate to emotional intelligence. So if you want to develop emotional intelligence, you have to accept the full range of your emotions so that you can not only accept your emotions, but also other people's emotions in order to establish a healthy and loving relationship with your emotions. And that's going to allow you to process them and release them healthfully. So let's talk about emotional maturity. Emotional maturity can be defined as your ability to take responsibility for your complexity of emotions and also not be dependent on anyone else to meet your emotional needs. In other words, emotional maturity means that you don't blame other people for your emotional state, and you don't require anyone else to make you feel content or happy or whole or to relieve your emotions, because no one's responsible for your emotional well-being but you. That's the credo. That's the principle of emotional maturity. Your emotions are your own, and as an adult, you're the only person responsible for your emotions. Emotional maturity also entails understanding that you are not your emotions, and and drawing a boundary around your identity when emotions arise. Emotional boundaries are so important for our well-being and the well-being of the people in our lives. And that's when you stop taking on the emotional needs of other people. That's when you stop thinking you're the cause of someone else's emotions. That's when you stop trying to manipulate or change the emotional state of someone else. That's when you stop thinking that someone else's emotions means something about you. Another aspect of emotional maturity is the acknowledgement and the acceptance that all emotions are valid. Joy is no more valid than anger. All emotions have a purpose. No emotion is quote unquote bad. Emotions are in and of themselves neutral. Some emotions may feel better than others, but that doesn't mean that certain emotions are superior to others. And emotional maturity also means that you not only start taking responsibility for your emotions, but you stop judging them, because only then can you increase your capacity to feel the full spectrum of your emotions. Because when you label and judge your emotions, you're not accepting them. And if you don't accept your emotions, then you don't accept all of yourself, because your emotions come from you. They're a part of you. They're a part of your human experience and existence. So why is self-love critical for emotional health? Let's talk about that. If you don't love yourself, then you also probably have difficulty trusting yourself, which means that you're not going to trust your emotions or trust your ability to feel your emotions and be able to give yourself compassion and grace and patience in the process of doing emotional healing work. Unconditional self-love is fundamental for a productive and authentic healing journey. That's my healing approach. That's why my program is so effective and is proven to work, because I start there. It's so fundamental. So when you lack unconditional self-love or when you love yourself conditionally, that means you only love yourself under certain conditions, then your ability to love your emotions is also conditional. All your emotions are deserving and worthy of your love because they come from you. They're a part of you. So when you develop a healing, healthy relationship with yourself, what happens is you naturally become more accepting and loving toward your emotions. And then that's when they become healing allies and the healing teachers that they are. That's when you can be with your shame and your anger and your guilt and your grief in true openness and curiosity and loving presence. That's when they can be safely and fully processed and released. And when you befriend your emotions, you become available to their wisdom. Because again, all emotions have a purpose, which means that all emotions have information, all of them. And that information could be that your needs aren't getting met. It could be that you need to let go of something or someone. It could be that there's a part of you that's yearning to be seen and appreciated. It could be that you need more fun or community or purpose in your life. When you befriend your emotions, you're communicating to your nervous system that you are safe and able to self-regulate and that you are in command of yourself. That's how healing happens. You have to feel in order to heal. So let's talk about what that means. I say that all the time. So a lot of people get stuck here, and a lot of people end up, instead of thinking through and rationalizing their emotions, instead of dropping into their bodies and trusting their bodies and trusting that their bodies know how to feel. Feelings are the domain of the body. Thoughts are the domain of the mind. So thoughts and feelings are not the same thing, and many people treat them similarly. Now, processing, meaning understanding the purpose and the meaning of an emotion, yeah, of course that requires cognition, but that's not feeling. Intellectually processing an emotion doesn't mean that the feeling has been felt or released. The feeling is still there, no matter how much you've journaled about it. The only way to truly and fully release emotions is to physically feel them. You can't think your way through an emotion, friend. I'm sorry. I've tried it, and it's just not possible, because feelings belong to the body. They're a felt sensation. That means you have to move in order to feel. So see what I did there? Emotions are energy in motion. So movement, or the transformation of energy, that could be crying, that could be rocking back and forth, that could be clenching your fists, that could be screaming into a pillow, that could be punching a pillow. Let's not punch a person or a thing or damage property, but a pillow's good. It could be jumping up and down. It could be hugging yourself. It could be dropping into your body as you take a walk. Those are all productive ways of feeling and releasing an emotion, allowing the emotion to move. And that's why somatic exercises are so healing and so beneficial, because they connect you to your body. They allow you to feel safe in your body, in command of your body, so that when a feeling arises, you can regulate yourself if you need to and feel productively. And sometimes we're not able to feel what we need to feel when a feeling comes up because, we're at work or with kids, or we're in a situation where it's not appropriate, or we're with someone who isn't emotionally safe. So then what you do is you acknowledge the emotion, you accept it, you honor it, and this is for yourself. This is all internal stuff. And then you return to that emotion when you are in an environment that is safe to feel productively. So all of that is feeling so that you can heal. And now that you have that understanding and know the difference between processing and feeling, let's talk about emotional health in terms of your healing journey and why it is you need to feel in order to genuinely heal. So suppressed and repressed emotions hijack your subconscious and nervous system, and they keep you stuck in a dysregulated state, and they reinforce wounded narratives and limiting beliefs formed from unresolved traumas and fears and stressful experiences. Emotions are the loudest signals of either safety or danger to your brain and your body. So establishing an honest and loving relationship with your emotions allows you to be in command of your brain and your body, and thus your healing journey, because your nervous system is hundreds of millions of years old, and it takes its cues from your subconscious parts of your brain, the older parts of your brain. And it's wired to be extremely sensitive to your emotions, particularly your fear-based emotions, because fear or stress is the indicator to your nervous system that something is wrong, that you are potentially in danger. So when you have a lot of suppressed and denied fear-based emotions like anger or shame or worry or guilt, that you have not healthfully and productively processed and felt and released, they are literally still looping in your subconscious and thus affecting your nervous system, which then results in a nervous system dysregulation. And you can't heal when you're stuck in nervous system dysregulation. Your brain and your body cannot heal when you are stuck in survival stress mode. So that means that when you free your emotions, you also free your mind and your body to heal. That's why feeling is so critical for healing. Unprocessed and unfelt emotions, they don't just go away because you don't want to think about them or you don't want to feel them. I mean, wouldn't that be awesome? But that's just not how we're designed. Again, energy can't be destroyed, only transformed. And so that energy in your brain and your body and your nervous system, that has to be transmuted somehow. And that's when mystery, chronic physical and mental symptoms arise. We are sentient by design. Emotions are integral to the human experience and spiritual experience. Love is an emotion. Bliss is an emotion. Tranquility is an emotion. The ironic thing is when you learn to make loving space for all your emotions, even the heavy and the painful ones, your ability to feel in general expands, which means your capacity to feel joy and bliss and tranquility expand. And eventually what happens is that the heavy emotions, they're not not so heavy anymore. And that doesn't mean that they feel any less intense or they become less painful, but your ability to feel deeply increases. Your tolerance and your resiliency for the uncomfortable emotions increases because you've reconditioned your nervous system. You've created that healing space in your brain and in your body. And it's true. You have to journey through the darkness in order to discover your light. And that's what developing emotional health is, that journey of reconnecting with the darker, heavier emotions in order to truly understand what it is to be in your joy, to be in your bliss, to feel genuine peace and freedom. But you have to make sure that you know how to make that journey safely and confidently in order for it to be productive, where you can avoid the needless struggle and stress that only further hinder your ability to heal and to be healthy and happy. So here's your action step for the week. Become aware of when you're taking responsibility for someone else's emotion and when you allow someone else to take responsibility for your emotion. That means anytime that you think you made me feel blank, like I'm sad because you did blank, anytime you become aware of that thought process or that belief, that's you lacking an emotional boundary. That's you not taking ownership of your emotion. And so when you become aware of that, your action step for the week is to either take ownership of your emotion or to release ownership of someone else's emotion. We have to learn to empathize and sympathize instead of taking on someone else's emotions. This is very important for empaths. And this is all about emotional maturity and boundaries. And so this week, become aware of where you do lack emotional boundaries and begin to determine when and how you can be more accountable for your emotions and allow others to be accountable for theirs. Now, I have an emotional health workshop in my Source membership program where I go even more deeply into this topic and discuss the most common emotions that people have difficulty with. And then I also provide you practices and meditations and somatic exercises to help you process and release and build a healing relationship with your emotions. So I invite you to join the Source membership program where you're not only going to learn how to create emotional health, but also mental, physical, and spiritual health as well. And not only that, but I also have a free guide to emotional health that you can download from my website. That's a really quick, awesome, empowering reference and resource. You can just go to my website. The link is in the show notes to get that free guide. I'm here for you and your emotional health. Just remember that the more comfortable and loving you become with your emotions, the greater your ability to heal becomes, because your emotions are so influential to your brain and to your body. And when you become empowered with your emotions, when you develop that healing and healthy relationship with your emotions, you become truly empowered in your brain and in your body. Thank you so much for joining me today in The Simple Source. I hope this episode has inspired you, reminded you of your healing power, and reawakened you to who your true and highest self is. If the show has empowered and enlightened your self-love, growth, and healing journey, please share this episode, leave a positive review on Apple or Spotify, and subscribe to be reminded of new episodes. I am so grateful for your presence, and all of your comments and your support are seen and read and deeply appreciated. They really do help this show so much. Also, sign up for my newsletter, The Weekly Source, to get more healing tips, motivation stories, and to get to know me better. And if you haven't read my book, Unconditional, You Are Perfect As You Are, I invite you to get your copy today and start reading. And lastly, I would love to see you inside my Source membership, the only holistic and comprehensive step-by-step self-healing program that is proven to work. It's time to stop struggling to heal and time to learn how to thrive more simply and joyfully. All the links are in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me today, and I will see you next time.